The opinions expressed in the following programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Talk Politics. I'm Debra Hutchison. Our guest this week is Oshawa MPP Jennifer French, who joins us virtually. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing well, thank you. I'm managing along with many of our friends and neighbors, keeping busy and just trying to keep at it.
Well, there's so much to talk about. I guess the newest news is that the state of the emergency was allowed to expire, but the province has kept our stay-at-home order for another week or so here in Durham, allowing some of the non-essential companies finally to open under strict restrictions. Do you welcome news, but what concerns do you have at this point?
Well, first with the expiry of the order, I suspect when we go back on the slated to be the 16th, that'll be first order of business, although your guess is as good as mine. It didn't have to expire. I mean, we've been clamoring to get back, as the official opposition, we've been saying, okay, this is a pretty long break. Under normal times it's standard. We're not in standard times. So, let's get back to the legislature. So it could have been dealt with already. However, here's where we find ourselves. I think that it's interesting, of course, monitoring the phone calls and the emails to my office, because people are always confused when there's an announcement, because they're sort of conflicting information, or information that you've got to sort of figure out where you fit. And so, I mean, we're always glad when there's information for folks that is hopeful. It's just frustrating when it is. It's been such a hodgepodge of communication this entire pandemic. So anyway, we'll see how it's received. All of the new pieces by the community. I mean, we're a pretty good barometer of how people are feeling in our office based on phone calls and emails.
Yeah. As you said, a ray of hope is, of course, the vaccine. A lot of people have been waiting very anxiously to get their vaccine, only to find, vaccine delays, reduced shipments. Some seniors out there have got their first shot, but now they're on hold waiting for the second shot. Some concerns there.
Lots of concerns there. Some of the things that we hear are from families of loved ones in retirement homes. So in the Durham region, so this isn't reflective of the rest of the province. Each province is different. But in our neck of the woods, Lakeridge Health has assured me that they have been to each long-term care home. They had a plan to get to all of the retirement homes. That kind of had to shift. The province reprioritized which retirement homes based on, or in the wake of the shortage. Mm-hmm. They were prioritizing it based on whatever the parameters were. I think, anyway, that has already been decided. Lakeridge has been doing their work to get the vaccines out there. But hearing from families saying, well, hold on, now what happens? My loved one's day was canceled. When has it been rescheduled? And those are answers that at that point we didn't have. Some of the parts, with the global delays and global challenges, obviously outside of our control, but provincially speaking, it has been a pretty, I would say, slow and sloppy rollout. We have done, I'm going to give credit where credit is due in terms of, our teams at Lakeridge and Public Health and their coordinating and whatnot. We've done pretty well here not to have wasted vaccine. We're hearing kind of ugly stories around the province, which is too bad. But a slow and sloppy rollout, with vaccines sitting in fridges that need to get into arms. Other challenges too I find personally upsetting. So political hat aside, you know, the Hillier stuff with him taking another job, you know, I think it needs to be clear direction from the province that if you're going to be in charge of the vaccine rollout, then you're in charge of the vaccine rollout. You don't, you know, you shouldn't have the opportunity to take on another job, you know, $20,000 a month to head up the vaccine distribution is not part-time pay. I would challenge anyone to argue that with me, but you know, it's things
It's
like
not
that.
part-time work either.
Well, it's not part-time work, and part-time, you know, and exactly. And it's that's insulting, I find. You know, this is top of mind for, you know, families and folks all across the province. We're hearing from different, you know, different workers, different groups of people saying I should be, you know, like I should be prioritized and I should be essential and different things. And I hear them. We do our best to kind of pass that along to the province. You know, we support the decisions being made by the healthcare professionals who are deciding how to prioritize people. It's the very least, it's fascinating, but there's a lot that is worrying as well. So, you know, we'll continue to do our part, and by that I mean, you know, we the population to do our best to stay safe while that vaccine, while the vaccine delivery continues, and I don't know, we'll hope that we indeed have the supply that we need in an orderly fashion so that we can get it out there to folks.
I mean, that's the most frustrating part. I'm sure if the province had 1 million vaccines to use, they'd be using them. But just the frustration of not being able to get that supply, which is totally out of your hands, no matter, you know, what party is in power here in Ontario. What do you do?
Well, I hear you on that. And that's much of what we see at the federal level, you know, when you're watching the news conferences about the kind of global challenges. But when you do hear about administrators, and we're not hearing this in Durham, but when you're hearing that administrators are getting it before patients, when you're hearing that, you know, it's being wasted in different jurisdictions, when you're hearing, and we, again, haven't had that here, and when you're hearing that it's sitting in fridges because they don't have the sort of human infrastructure set up, that they don't have that provincial direction to get it out there, that's problematic. And the Pfizer BioNTech, there's been a delay there, but the Moderna, that hadn't been the case, and we were seeing those slowdowns at the provincial distribution level. So again, you know, I mean, this is all a massive task, right? But we do need to have that coordinated effort, and we, you know, back to the, you know, Rick Hillier, the Mr. Hillier, and the Premier need to figure their stuff out so that we can get things rolling and keep it consistent.
Okay, let's move on to long-term care. You know, you and I have talked extensively about the conditions in our long-term care homes. You just today, as we're taping this, have sent out notice that you're supporting the region's call for a full public inquiry into what happened at Sunnycrest, in Whitby, and Thorntonview in Oshawa.
Yes, the region had called on the government to do a full investigation. A lot of the municipalities have echoed that. I'm doing my part to amplify that call, but it's consistent with calls across the province from different communities. I'll say begging the province to do that deep dive into what went wrong, the failures, so we can learn from it, so that we can hold people accountable, protect people in future. You know, our office has been working alongside families since the beginning. You know, Orchard Villa and the survivors and the families, like, I hold them very close to my heart, and I've built some pretty strong relationships with families because it's been gut-wrenching to know what they know, and to feel their loss, and to know that other families are going through the same. And you know, the numbers have just gone right up. This second wave, we were not prepared for it. We did not brace for it. We didn't prepare for it. We didn't staff for it. Other jurisdictions, other provinces, you know, they made plans. They hired PSWs. We did not. You know, I think the government, I mean, I can't speak for them because I really don't understand what motivates them on this front, but it's like they were just sort of waiting for the vaccine and that was going to be their plan. And we've had so many people die. Now, locally with Sunnycrest and Thorntonview, we've been hearing from families, very concerned families. I spoke to one woman on the weekend, not this past weekend, but on a weekend, and she was watching her loved one, she thought, starve to death through the window because she just didn't have the strength to feed herself, didn't have the strength, and she was watching her just deteriorate. And when we find out what really has been happening, in those homes and in others across the province, we should be shining a huge light on this. We should be throwing the doors wide open. And I don't mean literally in this case. I mean, doing that work to figure out how do we keep people safe and how do we catch problems, because there's so many. And it's galling to know how hard we fought for an independent judicial public inquiry after Orchard Villa. And just in the province, right? We were all calling for, like, frontlines and healthcare workers and families, the MPPs, I specifically, we were calling for that independent judicial inquiry. We didn't get it. We got that behind closed doors, Premier's commission. And now when the commission's asked for more time and an extension to December 31st, the government said no. They've stopped them. They've been blocking documents. The Premier himself, they wanted to speak to him, and he's been able to dodge going before them. And that's what we anticipated, that it would be a limited process, and that's what we got. And here we find ourselves again. So all that to say, yes, we need to have real answers. We need to be willing to ask the tough questions and willing to face the grueling, awful answers in order to prevent further harm.
Now, that long-term commission has made transcripts of testimony available online, including I've read the testimony of the families affected by the Sunnycrest outbreak. So anyone could look at it, and just, if you're not familiar with what went on, it's a real eye-opener, an incredible eye-opener.
And I don't mean to diminish the work that they've been able to do, but the commission themselves has been frustrated by the fact that documents they've requested or things that they have asked for, that they have run out of time, that they can't get them, which is why they've asked for that extension. And they have not been granted that extension so that they can indeed have those additional pieces. And I know that they had Minister Fullerton and Minister Elliott come and testify or depose. They wanted the Premier, and he will not. So it's really, it galls me.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there. We're going to take a quick break. More of our conversation with Oshawa MPP Jennifer French after this. Don't go away.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Hi there, I'm Mark Grice, and I hope you'll tune into my show here. It's called Mark Grice the Artist, and you don't want to miss it. You get to see whether or not I can finish a painting in an hour. I go from start to finish, from a beautiful photograph sent in by the viewers to a finished painting. You get all the tips and tricks that you need to make paintings on canvas right here on Rogers TV.
Hi, I'm Constable Darrell Rice, Durham Regional Police Service. Tune into Rogers Cable 10 to watch me on Seniors Talk with DRPS, where we'll talk about all kinds of amazing information and community programs for you, our seniors in Durham Region.
And welcome back to Talk Politics. Our guest this week is Oshawa MPP Jennifer French. Now, when we went to break, we were talking about the situation in long-term care during this pandemic, and the Long-Term Care Commission has been told to wrap everything up by April. They want an extension to December. They have not been given that extension. How long do would a commission generally take to finish its investigation? Is this really fast, tracking everything?
I don't have that answer. We had been calling for that, judicial independent public inquiry. This is not that. This is a creature of the premier, right? So it is what he determines. Every inquiry that we have seen throughout history, has been what it needs to be. So I think when the body itself is saying this is what we need it to be, they should be able to drive it, within reason. But if they can show why they need that time, and they have very clearly, then they need more time. So that's a point of frustration. But in terms of how long an inquiry would have taken, that the government was really clear and saying, oh, an inquiry can go on forever. An inquiry is what it needs to be to have the answers, and no one says you have to wait till the end. And this is what our argument was back then, and what my argument is today in calling for an inquiry into what has happened at Sunnycrest and Thorntonview is, as you do that deep dive, as you do an inquiry, you gain knowledge along the way. No one says you have to wait till day, the final day, to learn anything. You're learning along the way. So you can make those changes along the way. If there's something about entry and entrance protocols, staffing, training that's required, you can it's a find and fix. You can do it as you go. And that is what I think is certainly needed right now, is that we're making changes as we go.
A lot of talk about accountability as, this commission and the investigation goes on and we learn more. And there is a lot of frustration from some families that say there is no accountability for what happened to their loved ones.
I've already used the word frustrating and galling. Like, I don't have the right word. It's upsetting to know that a family can't be involved in many parts of the process, that they will never get the answers that they seek, that they won't have that closure, that the learning doesn't happen to protect others. Many families are saying, we just don't want this to happen to anyone else. Well, it's going to, because nothing has changed. We saw that from the first wave, where we were not prepared, and we could have been and should have been better prepared. And which speaks to the larger, private retirement homes are allowed to do whatever the heck they want behind closed doors, and things were already a mess. And then we got hit with a pandemic, but a different conversation. And then now, we realize it's not just about the commission or an inquiry. There is no accountability. This government brought forward that legislation that protects private operators from these lawsuits. The accountability, the lack of accountability, it's not just speaking to transparency and the ability to get answers. It is holding anyone accountable. It does not happen. There aren't processes for that. And that is something that, working alongside families and working alongside the healthcare advocates, I have been putting together sort of framing legislation. So I'm working with Legislative Council right now, and those are the folks at the legislature that help you kind of take the ideas, figure out where they would fit in legislation. So we've been putting together something calling for accountability in long-term care. And I'll be glad to delve into that another time when we actually have that, that would be legislation in our hands, but it hits a number of different points in terms of accountability, from the family involvement to the ability for, these unnamed private companies to not be able to just kind of sneak under the radar. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's in the weeds that would be hard to communicate broadly and feel, anyway, not to get into all of that. Putting together framework legislation for accountability in long-term care, because I think it is very clear to all of us that what we have is not what we deserve, and not what can continue going forward.
Not what our loved ones deserve, that's for certain.
No.
Let's move on to kids are back at school. Was that the right decision to send them back?
I think that if you're going to send kids back, that you should be doing it based on information from, the public health care professionals, but also everyone has been calling for, including, the official opposition, but anyone who is following this pandemic and following the spread of the virus are saying that you need fewer people in classrooms, different things in terms of ventilation or what have you. And so sending kids back to class, I know, we hear from families, we hear from parents, and they're in equal parts glad because they want, they're emotionally and psychologically, their kids want to be at school. There's that, the childcare part that school serves, the education that they want them to get, but then parents and caregivers are torn because they're still cramming them into classrooms without making those reductions in number of students. And so if you're going to send kids back to school, for goodness sakes, make a plan and make sure, especially when we're talking about these new faster spreading problematic variants, we're not seeing any shift in strategy from the Ministry of Education. And so we would like to see that. We would like to see smaller class sizes, different and better supports, the things that have been called for since the beginning. And since the beginning, we haven't seen them.
Now, in saying that, the province says, according to the province, that they had the clear support of both Ontario's and local medical officers of health to reopen the schools.
Okay.
And they say, knowing that, they've taken additional steps and made additional investments to better protect our students.
I want to know what those are, because this is a Ministry of Education that has said magical things that haven't been real. Like, they have talked about the mandatory training that all educators got, for virtual schooling or whatnot, and every educator in, yes, the unions, but all of the individual teachers that I know are like, what is this training? Like, there are things like that they spin things and say all sorts of fun stuff, but I would like to see what those actual supports look like, because they're changing it as they go, but from the beginning we've needed the supports in place, whether ventilation, what have you, but smaller class sizes, fewer bodies on buses, all of that has not happened, and that is still called for. So if they've got some medical folks that are approving parts of their plan, I'm glad that they're getting to see the plan, because that's another thing that, you don't have to look hard for examples of, this government has said that they have the support of this body or that body, and that body says, well, but we hadn't seen it yet. We haven't seen that plan. So there's a lot going on. I think parents just want to know that their ducklings are safe. And we want that for them too. Brings us into March break. They're threatening to cancel March break. I've talked to 2 teachers who are just like, I'm going to take a leave. I can't do this. They need that break desperately. Parents, educators right now, they're carrying a lot. They're doing unbelievable gymnastics to make this happen, and to pull their only break between now and the summer is, I think, cruel and unusual. And this has not been a government clear on on their directives. You know, it's everybody stay home, but go shopping on the big, you know, holiday weekend. And earlier in the pandemic, the premier said, well, go ahead and travel. Well, look how well that turned out. So, you know, now it's, well, we might cancel March break so everyone stays home and doesn't go to Florida. Just don't go to Florida, folks. You know, but it's, there's a lot of chaos for good folks doing good work and trying their best to get through this.
There have been some people who have questioned whether or not the kids, not canceling March break, but perhaps the kids shouldn't have been put back in class until after March break, like even wait 2 weeks till after March break. What do you think of that idea? Should we have?
It's hard to keep up. Well, it seems to, I mean, their approach has been, you know, regional, right? So Durham, they went back on the 8th. In other boards, they have not. You know, in northern boards, they've been back because they don't have the, you know, broadband or internet infrastructure to be able to do virtual learning or whatever. Like it's kind of a piecemeal. It's a piecemeal approach, and I'm not attacking that in and of itself. You know, like different areas deserve different considerations. And looking at the numbers, you know, like in Kingston, they're green, I think, as of Wednesday, and you know, they're reopening and all of that stuff, which is unimaginable in areas, not just like Durham, but in some of the hot spots. So again, it has to be that the decisions are made in partnership with the you know, the public health folks, and right alongside them with the recommendations. But again, the smaller class sizes would make a difference. And that variant, we don't have the answers. We do not have our finger on that pulse, you know, and that is taking us back to long-term care. That is huge worry for people in homes where there's, you know, even the whiff of a variant is terrifying for people. So.
Okay, we only have about 30 seconds left. Where are we at freeing highways 412 and 418?
Well, my bill successfully passed second reading with support of the legislature. Yay, which was a win for the community. That was a grassroots movement that came from folks. We heard it loud and clear and saw it all the way through that. Now it's up to the government to pull it to committee and make it happen, or skip committee and just make it law. Now it falls to the government to decide whether or not it will indeed be a priority. Your guess is as good as mine. I will keep pushing to remind them that they've made this, I would say, loose commitment. They weren't super excited to support it. Hopefully, but it was.
We're out of time. Jennifer French, thanks so much for joining us, and thanks to you for joining us. Until next time, stay safe, everyone.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
Hi, welcome to Cooking with Corey. I'm your host, Corey Dern, and with me is the fabulous Grant Peckford, Catherine Seaton, Ted Rowney, the lovely Lisa Lacey, Nellie Peterson, Sasha Sudat, Jason Poulter. Hello. So what are we making? Have you ever looked at a recipe and thought, oh, I'm not quite sure how to do this, or not really understood the technique behind why you're doing it this way? And my show is the show for you. That is exactly what you were looking for. The best thing about this is you're actually treating the tofu as somebody who would treat a steak. Where's the salt and the tequila that goes with it? Wait, was that a different show? Maybe. That's Drinking with Corey. You're yummy. Thank you so much for being on the show.
I love it. Thanks for teaching me how to cut.
I joined because I wanted to help others.
To be a part of something bigger.
To show my kids what's important.
I joined to make my community stronger.
To make a difference.